Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Wednesday. It's February 23rd. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And I thought I would start out by showing you the daily chart here. You can see we're in very oversold territory. Um, we're actually very close to making a new all-time low on this contract. This is today's bar, very, very bearish. And these have been some great trading days. Both of these days have been really good trading days, but today was almost, I mean, there's so many easy second entry shorts at key entry points and so forth today that if you took them, you should have had a really good trading day. Um, at this point, it looks like we may be headed for a measured move down, which is going to put us down here around 4,000. That means we got a couple of more 100 points to go, but we could do that in a day the way things have gone lately. So there's nothing but bad news out there. Uh, looks like there's, if there's not already going to be a war in Eastern Europe, and we'll probably get drug into that, and it's not going to be good for us regardless. Oil's going through the roof. There's just a lot of negative things going on out there for this market. The good thing is it's easy for us day traders. If you've got longer term investments, which I have my own long-term investments, and I'm not very happy about that because I'm just watching them deteriorate. So, I'd rather see this market do this to the upside than the downside. But as a day trader, all we care about is movement for the most part. So at this point, we could be headed for a measured move down here. There's another thing to consider. There's been a double bottom here, and so we may fail here and recover. Sometimes these are great buying opportunities, so we'll just have to see. But my guess is we're headed for a measured move down. That would be my first guess. However, just keep in mind we could bounce. What you want to see here is this bounce back up and test this a couple of times and fail and then go lower. However, with the way things are going and the negativity that's out there in the news every day, we could just drop straight on down. We're getting a long way. Here's the midline on this thing, and we're way away from that. So, of course, you can see here how far and long we stayed away from it. So, if we make a measured leg down again, we could make that in a couple of days. If we have a couple more bars like today or some of these other big bars in here. I mean, look, this bar here. I remember this day. I want to say this was a 200-point day, if I remember right. 211-point day, which is just almost crazy. And if you measure from the low where we're at now, that's probably about that's less than 200 points. So we could do that. So technically we could do that in a day. We've done that recently. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you this daily chart just to kind of give you a peek at what it looks like. It looks like we're going for a measured move here. However, you got to pay attention to this support across here. It's very possible that we could bounce on a failed breakout, and this might just be a big range. So at this point, I'm leaning towards a measured move at a minimum. So we'll see what happens. But let's flip over to the 2,000 tick intraday chart and go through the trade. Okay, here's what we're looking at. There's actually two legs down here in a large two-tiered channel. This channel was not very helpful. You really couldn't find this till the day was over. So it's not likely that this, unless you're really good at this, it's not likely this channel you would have had it or it helped you. But there it is, and it's valid. You can see that midline in play out from way up here all the way down on both sides. Really, you need these shorter term channels to trade it. So there's like 4 or 5 major. There's a major channel here, correction, another one here, and here. And that's your major channels. So um, you needed those really to trade this properly. So let's zoom in. And you can see there's a lot of trades here. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. Most of them are really straightforward and just basic trades that anybody that understands what we do should be able to find. Right out of the gate, we were in this range. And we came off the lows, went to the high, came back. We weren't quite back to the lows, and we bounced here. And then you get, this is just the first entry here. Notice all the way up that there's, let's zoom in a little more. That's your first break lower. So that's just the first entry, but there's a little congestion there, so it's a little failed break higher. It's also the first close outside this channel and a move to a new high. And you're so far away from the EMA. So there's reasons to like that trade. I marked it green. It's just after 7 o'clock, and I like that trade. The smarter move is to wait on the lower high, and as long as you got room back to that EMA, I'd feel all right taking that. You could really look at that as a 1, 2, 3 triple test as well. So that's another thing to consider. But the fact that we went back through the EMA right there concerns me a little bit. So you need to have room back to that to scalp out. And if you do, you're okay there. And I think there's a couple of points in there. There's enough room to scalp out of that easily regardless. There's a second entry short here, but the signal bar is too strong. And we're just kind of chopping along here. Bounce down the bottom. We finally come back. This one is tempting because you could argue that this is a quadruple test or whatever. So you might take that trade. I didn't mark it, but you could argue for it to be green. There's a lower high here, but you can't go short right into that EMA. But when this breaks higher and turns down and goes out the other side, I like going short there. Now you got a failed second entry long, but really it's just a trap. And when it breaks higher there, because that's a second entry long, and of course if you're understand what we're doing, you know you can't go long into those highs that we've just turned down off multiple times. You know we're probably going lower, so you're just sitting tight. And when you see that trap, I mean, that's where patience comes in, because you'd be surprised. I mean, traders will see that second entry and say, oh, I got enough room to scalp out, I'll take that trade. And the trade might have even worked, but don't take that trade. Let's just see. No, you need 6 ticks, and there's only 5 there. So that would have been a 4-tick fail. You would have been bouncing off your exit order and failed, and look what happens to you. Don't take those trades. Understand that prices are working from high to low to high to low. And actually at this point, we went much lower than we had before. So that could mean that we've got a lot further to go to the downside again. But anyway, you get a lower high here, don't take that, and then you get the failure. And that runs down the bottom. You actually get a triple test bounce here. I didn't mark this one because it's just so congested, but that's another one you might consider just because it's a triple test. And it's such a nice bullish bar. It's right into the EMA, but if you're going to go long on the other side, if it breaks higher, you're probably going to get a scalp out of it. So it's one I'll at least mark green. It's a little bit aggressive, and notice how we make a lower high here on a first entry and then a lower high here on the second entry. We really don't count for second entries or anything inside a range like this because you'll get chopped up. But if you see a second entry on a good setup, then by all means take it. And I like this one. And we're not looking for this thing to keep going. We're just looking to get a scalp. But in this case, it just continues to rocket on down. So, and this was the original lows down here, so you got to be real careful. But we didn't quite get to the last couple of lows there, and we bounced. And you get a first entry, second entry, and notice that big, strong, bearish bar. I like going short there. Again, you're not really expecting this to keep going here. You're just looking to take this second entry scalp. And maybe you get lucky and look at it go. It just rockets off. So that's a great trade. And if you catch this one or this one, you get a runner on these. And you're probably done for the day by 9 o'clock, not long after 9 o'clock. And you might even manage this runner all the way down until you get a break of this yellow channel. So, I mean, these are the kind of days we really have to take advantage of, and we've had a few of them lately. So, when you see these kind of days, be prepared. But we drop on down. There's a failed second entry long there, but you're too far away from the EMA. It looks too congested. We come back, notice you get a first entry, and then it breaks higher right there, and you get a second entry short right off that key entry point. It looks a little congested, but in the fact that we're going lower and it's right off the key entry point, take that trade. And then we come back down here and notice that you get, technically this is a third entry short by the counts, notice, because there's a little tick lower right there, first entry, second entry. So technically this is a third entry, but clearly that looks like one leg back, a correction, and a second leg back. That's still a two-legged correction back to the EMA, and that's the first break of that yellow channel, and that's a fairly strong sell-off. And look at it, and look how bearish that bar is. Take that trade. There's a lower high here, but it's an inside bar, and notice how we get some resistance. There's actually a second entry right there, but at this point we already had a break and a new low, and we're just kind of working sideways, so I was not too crazy about taking that one. And you see what would have happened. It kind of fails and breaks out, but this is really a double bottom too, so I would only count that as a first entry. So really your second entry is right here, plus you make technically you got a little correction there, but it didn't break higher. But there's your first high. You come back and you test it once, you go lower, and you come back and you test it twice, and you get a little failed breakout, and it's a second entry short. Technically by the count, you could say 1, 2, or 3, but generally when you get a double bottom like that, I usually count that as a new low, and then you get your second entry right there. And here you also get the trap, and it's also a first entry, second entry, so there's actually a failure right there, but again it just looks too sideways. Notice there's still a little resistance at that same level all the way across there. So it's a lot of sideways stuff there. So really you're trying to play, the way I played this more than anything was the triple test and the little failed break higher that traps people with enough room to get out here. And again, it didn't matter, it just takes off. And so now you got a break and a couple of legs to a new low. Let me back out again here, because I forgot to talk about something here. The way we got these measured moves. Notice you had this big leg down early, and then you had your correction, and then you had your second leg down, and notice that's right where we found support, and we actually broke a little lower before it was over, but that would have been a great target for you. And then early on too, right in here, where we were just kind of going through, you had the range up here, and if you measure that, which is this blue line, we got a little too, but I usually put this on here just so you can see it. And notice we went to that till almost to the tick before we bounced, and we found some more support there before it broke lower and then corrected. So I wanted to point those out. I forgot to talk about those a little earlier. Okay, I think we were just talking about, which trade were we just talking about? Right here. We dropped on down, then we bounce. And again, this is like a third entry short, but it confirms this trend line. And notice you're working up, and you actually get a close outside and a new high all in one bar. But the reason I like this one's just such a good signal bar, a little ways away from the EMA, and it confirms the trend line. The better trade's probably to wait on this when it breaks higher and fails and gives you a lower high. You could trade that on the engulfing bar, or wait till even that one closes. Either way, it's a nice setup. So there's another second entry here. Notice the new low, first entry, second entry. But signal bar doesn't qualify. But we made a new high, then you test it once. You drop down and you test it twice, and guess what? It's right off the key entry point too. So you get a triple test, a nice bearish bar. Just go short again. Unfortunately, it didn't keep going this time. It bounced here before it broke on down. And then we're just kind of working sideways again. You don't want to be trying to buy this at all. It's too strong of a sell-off. You want to wait till you get a better correction like over here. But it drops on down. We're just working sideways. And again, you got a new high there, and you get a first test. You really get a second test here, but it fails, and then you get this little failed breakout. There's not a good enough signal bar there on that one to take it, but you've also got this little channel after a failed break lower, and it's working up. You get a close outside and move to a new high, and that big bearish bar on a failed breakout. I like going short right there. It looked like it was going to bounce for a second, but once it pushes on back through there, boom, off it goes. And then it finds a higher low down here and, of course, rallies. And now you get your close outside of this blue channel. And this thing corrects really strongly before it turns back down. That's because there's a bigger channel here that you can't really see it at this point. But this is the first break of this blue channel here. And notice you got a new low there, and you get a first entry, and then you run up here and you get a second entry short, way away from the EMA. You got a close outside this blue channel, a new high. Then you make a lower high here, breaks higher first. I like trading that one on the engulfing one, but you could even wait here. There's a little bit of sideways there, but that's technically not congestion yet. We're still making, you're still making higher highs and higher lows here, and then suddenly you make a lower high and take off down. So what it is you're just running into resistance on that where the midline turns out to be. And it shoots down, then fights its way back up and finally pushes through there. And now it looks like we got a reversal going on here. There's not a reversal pattern you want to trade there, unfortunately. But it runs up, and then notice it makes a high there. And you get a first entry, drops on down, you get a second entry. At this point, you wouldn't have the trend line, but it's right at the EMA. I'd take that long, second entry long. Look at the EMA pointing up now. Plenty of room to scalp out here. And then you get a first entry, second entry, and it fails when this breaks lower and turns up. So now you got a failure, plus that is a new high, first entry, second entry. So you got a second entry long, failed second entry short, and they're all right here at the key entry point. You could argue we probably got a close outside by here. Here it's, I don't know if I'd call that convincing close outside, and this could be a little bit lower, like so. And this could be a little higher. Still fits in there fairly well, just like that. And but by here you definitely get a close outside, and it takes off, and you can tell they trapped them by look at how it goes, how it rockets up there. And of course you get a close outside and a couple of legs up to a new high, and it turns down. It's really hard to know where to enter here. This is definitely congested. Still a long way away from the EMA, but that's a sure trap, asking to get trapped to take that. Wait for a lower high on this because this is, I mean, even here, that's not a super convincing close outside, but it looks like there's a close outside. So you got to be careful trying to get short. I would wait on a reversal pattern. I wouldn't try to take these up here. And notice what happens. It rockets down. You get a first entry. Look how it comes right through the EMA. That's your first clue. Turns up, barely touches the EMA and drops again. And that's a big move down. And then it tries it one more time on the second entry long and fails. So that's a failure. Go short right there. And you would expect at least a measured leg like that. And this thing, the bottom just drops out of it. And technically, there's a failure. Notice you're working down, you get a first entry right there and then a second entry. But this all looks like one move. So this is a first real correction, and then there's a second one here. So technically, you could argue that to be a failed second entry long, and it breaks higher and turns and goes out the other side. But it's just so far away from the EMA. It does look a little congested there. So I'd just steer clear of that. And if you didn't get in up here, of course, it drops on down, and then just be patient. In a few minutes later, you get a first entry and a second entry on the first break of that channel right at the key entry point. breaks higher, turns down, goes out the other side. I mean, we've seen second entries like this all day. Unfortunately, this one doesn't give you a huge runner, but still a nice trade. Now you got a break, you get a couple of legs down, and you correct again. Here you got one working up. You get a close outside. Again, it's very similar to the one we looked at earlier. It's kind of hard to, it definitely closes outside the way if you draw it like this, and I believe that to be correct. But it's not hugely convincing. But this is a much more micro channel, so this break would be a little bigger on this channel versus how it looks on this bigger channel. So just keep that in mind. So, but it runs up, then you make a lower high, and you're so far away from the EMA. When this breaks higher and fails, I like going short just to try to ride it back to the EMA at a very minimum. And it drops down, gives you a first entry and then a second entry, and that's also a new low and a first entry, second entry. And this has just been a big downtrend day, and at the very least you've got this channel. I didn't mark this one, but working down. That's your break, and on the second entry you move to a new low, and then it just kind of starts chopping a little bit sideways, but you got another channel working up. You get a close outside and move to a new high, and that technically you confirm that trend channel right, or this trend line right here, but you could almost say, hey, that's just your first touch, so here's your second one. Well, this confirms it if you don't want to trust that confirmed it. And this is also a first entry, second entry, and a nice bearish bar. So you get another nice entry. Again, no big runner here. And then there's another second entry short here, but unfortunately your signal bar is not strong enough. And this thing drops on down. You don't want to be entering in here. Finally, it works its way back. You get a close outside, a new high, and it fails right at the key entry point. Another big bearish bar. And that's a second entry short. Notice the new low. Technically, there's a little break lower, but you could still look at that as a second entry short. It's a lower high regardless off the key entry point, so it doesn't matter how you looked at it. And then you get a failed second entry long here, so if it breaks lower there, just take it. And off it goes. And you could really look at this as a double top, and this is a lower high, but you're having to go low at the very low of the day here, and so just not a very smart idea. Even though this trend, I would say this trend channel looks like it's still in play. We did have a close outside up here, but sometimes when this trend may not have even started. I mean, clearly there's resistance there, but this is where the downtrend really started real well. So you should probably go ahead and try to draw another trend channel in here. Let's see if how that fits. There it is, right there. And so that's your first break, and you're still looking for a new low. And notice that once you get a break of this blue one and a new low, and you won't always draw another channel like this after a break, but in a big downtrend, you're going to get multiple trend channels like this. And that's why you don't want to try to buy this stuff unless you get a confirmed trend going in the other way. Don't try to buy this stuff. Somebody sent me an email and they're trying to buy the bottoms on these things, and you might get lucky and grab it, but the odds are you'll probably lose and you'll wish you'd have never tried to do it. But anyway, we drop on down, we get the second entry short there, you get the failed second entry long there. We talked about the lower highs there. I don't think I would take those. Drop on down, and then you get a first entry, second entry. Unfortunately, this is your signal bar, plus this channel is really still in play, and that looks like the first close outside, so you really can't enter that. And then we bounce, and it takes us into 230. I just don't see anything else there that's really worth taking, especially after you've made your measured leg down there, which I failed to point out. So, but that's where we stand. So lots of nice trades in here, and I had this conversation with somebody that you should be able to find I mean, if you look at this, we had 2 legs down, 2 measured legs, each one of them. You can see each one of them around 70, 80 points there. And so that's, what is that, 280 ticks or something like that, or a little more, close to 300 ticks. Well, if you can't get 4 ticks a couple of times out of a 350 tick move, then I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but it shouldn't be that difficult to get 4 ticks a couple of 3 times out of a move like that. And you got 2 moves like that with also basically a 40-point move up. So 160 ticks up. Hopefully you can, somewhere in there you can nab 4 ticks. So that's the way you need to look at this. I mean, these sell-offs, when you get rallies or sell-offs that are this strong, you have to take advantage of them, and you'll get a lot of runners too. So just keep that in mind. And but we're getting close to 30 minutes here and a lot of trades. So I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully you had a good trading day. If you struggled on a day like this, you probably got some work to do, because this is the kind of day it shouldn't be that difficult to find a couple of scalps in there where you can nab 4 ticks. And with so many runners, if you maybe you're not trading runners yet, but if you are, you probably excuse me, had a little throat issue there, but you should be able to find some runners on a day like this too. But even if you don't, you ought to be able to nab a few 2 or 3 scalps out of there for 4 ticks. I mean, you could almost throw darts at a board if you just stuck to the second entries. You couldn't hardly go wrong. So, and several of those had runners on them. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. Believe it or not, tomorrow's Thursday, and I'll wrap up our week. It was a short week due to the President's Day. But I'll be back tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.